see? And you made sure that pin wasn't bent, because if you couldn't pull that pin, your parachute wouldn't open, see? And there's usually a sign up over the parachute, brother, to say, if it doesn't work, bring it back.
My kid brother was learning how to jump out of an airplane. And he was going through all this school. And there was a fellow, and we seen the emergency chute open.
Oh, yeah.
And he was sitting in there, and the guy was saying, what happened? He says, well, I looked up, and I looked up and didn't see nothing. So he says, try it again. And then he says, you pull every single string you got.
That's
until
right.
one of them opens.
That's right.
And that's exactly what he did. And he walked away to talk about it. Anytime you want. We're rolling.
Okay.
So you guys want a little something to drink before you, or while you're working?
That's up to you if you want. Yeah, I mean, they're doing the talking. If you want to go give them something to drink, that's cool.
Okay, I'll put it. He can have something right here. Sure.
Yeah, I could.
What would you like? Orange juice, Diet Coke, or Sprite?
Orange juice.
Orange juice.
That's to say how sensitive those microphones are.
Okay, and I won't make any noise. I'll get out of here. And let's see. I'll put this in the living room. You can. What do you want? I can.
And make sure your husband's got something to drink
Oh,
there.
sweetheart.
No,
He's gonna be the one behind the camera.
I don't need.
You can talk. I don't think he
No,
can.
I don't need anything. I'm fine.
Edit.
If he's got,
I don't need anything. No, I'm okay. I'm okay.
go to Sprite.
So we'll get right here.
Now, this cover doesn't have to be on the table unless you want it.
Actually, I don't even see it.
Huh?
I don't
Oh, you don't see it? Huh?
Yeah, good. Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank you for allowing us to come into your home and giving us the opportunity to hear your personal story. First, we're going to start off with an introductory. Can you tell the folks out there who you are? And
My name is George A. Taylor. I was born in Virginia in 1919, so I'm now 79 years old. My early childhood, I went to Philadelphia when I was 5 years old, and I lived in the Philadelphia area until I was in the 6th grade. And then the Depression came, so my mother and father went back to their home in Virginia. And then I went to grade school and to high school in Virginia. And I think I finished high school in 1937 or 38, I don't know which one it was now. And after finishing high school, I went to Virginia State College and to be a major in chemistry. And that was at the beginning of World War II. And I think it was my second year there. They started a civilian flying program where civilians could get their private pilot's license. And I wasn't fortunate to take the program. However, there was a young lady that I used to sit at the dining room table with, and her name was Theodosia Frazier from Charleston, South Carolina. And I believe she was one of the first black women that was killed soloing in that program. And of course, my mother and father wouldn't send me the $25 to take the course after that. However, Pearl Harbor, of course, came December the 7th, and I had to report to the draft, not to the draft board, but we had to take a physical and for the draft board. And in 1942, I was told that I would be drafted in the spring of 1942. And so I didn't register for the second semester. And I went to Philadelphia, of course, and I was determined not to be drafted, so I volunteered for the Air Force. I took the written exam, and then I think in September of '42 I was sworn in, and I passed the physical, the written exam and the physical, and so then I was waiting to be called into the cadet program of the Air Force. However, I did receive my greetings from the President in March of 1942, but since I had passed the written exam and the physical exam for the Air Force, I was permitted to, I wasn't drafted, and I was permitted, they gave me the choice of waiting until the Air Force called me. So I was lucky in that respect. And I was finally called by the Air Force to report to Tuskegee in December of 1942.
Had you heard of Tuskegee before this?
Oh yeah, I'd heard of Tuskegee. I'd heard of the school. You know, in Negro history, we'd learned about Booker T. Washington, how he'd gone to Hampton, and how he'd founded Tuskegee Institute. But I knew very little other than what I'd read. But I did learn later on, of course, that they were building an airfield there to train black pilots. And I had read some articles on not at that time, Captain Davis, and that I was aware of the fact that there were a few blacks that had graduated and was flying in the Air Corps. And at that time, of course, the Army Air Corps the Air Force was a part of the Army Air Corps, or part of the Army, rather.
What were you trained to be in the military?
I didn't hear you.
What were you trained to be in the military?
We were trained to be pilots, and I was assigned, I was in class 43H. And originally, I think there were about 56 cadets in that class, and 20 of us finished. There were 21 in the class, however, one officer was a Haitian officer. So out of the 65, the 56 that was in the class, 20 of us finished.
Do you know why some of them didn't graduate? Were there any reasons or stories you can tell?
I've heard, of course, they had the quota system, and getting through the cadet corps, I considered, well, you had to have a certain amount of ability, but it was lucky. You were lucky too. They would wash you out on attitude, personality, they didn't like you, anything. If you were a little slow in your studies and on your flying ability, coordination, things of that sort. So they had a multitude of things to wash you out. And we had very little recourse. I mean, it was new to us, and we had really no one to, if you thought you were getting a bad deal, there's nothing you could say, you know.
How were you treated by the other officers and cadets?
Oh, the other cadets, we were treated just fine. However, when you first went to Tuskegee, you were low man on the totem pole. We were the dummies, and they had the class system. The lower classes had to do what the upperclassmen asked you to do. They never laid a hand on you, but they could work you to death, run you to death, make you do push-ups, and march you through mud or anything. I mean, but it was a good test of whether or not, you know, you could take a little hazing and not blow your top.
What kind of aircrafts were you assigned to fly or maintain?
Well, we first, and during the training, we flew the Stearman, which was a biplane, 2 wings. we got 60 hours in the Sturman. That program was taught by, the instructors were civilians, black civilians that had been hired by the Tuskegee Institute. And they were the ones that taught you how to fly. They took you up, they familiarized yourself with the plane, with the area you're flying over, and they showed you how to do all the maneuvers that were necessary to control an aircraft. So you learned the airplane from for loops, Emmerman, spins, and when they thought that you were able to control that airplane, they would solo you. And so you were supposed to solo within the first 10 or 12 hours. And if you didn't make that, sometime a lot of the guys would wash out. And luckily I soloed in time. I wasn't washed out on that score. In the meantime, now the first couple of months you're in ground school. All the work is you're taking our weather, Morse code, our aircraft engines, a lot of all subjects that are connected with flying.
What unit were you assigned to, and did you guys ever hear about the 99th? And
oh yeah,
what was
the 99th was flying at Tuskegee at the time I was there, and we would see the flying officers, admire them, and pray that someday you would make it and you wouldn't wash out. And that was your ambition. I mean, that's the thing that kept, and we saw General Davis and Spanky Roberts and Custis and DeBow, all the guys, some of the guys in the first classes, you know, and they were flying from Tuskegee at the time, P-40s. And that was the plane that they went overseas in. That was the first black squadron to fly in combat in the European theater.
Were you ever assigned to the Freeman Fields, and what was your opinion or understanding about the incident that occurred at Freeman Field?
No, I was never with the bomber group. They were the ones that were assigned to Freeman Field. However, we had somewhat similar incidents in the 332nd group before we went overseas. Selfish Field was segregated. We had a black officers club, and we could not go to the white officers club. We had a black mess, and of course we were busy learning how to fly and getting our overseas training in, so we didn't have much time to, you know, concentrate on it. And when we got to Camp Patrick Henry, there was a little rebellion there because we would not go to the theater that was assigned to our area. They had a segregated theater, so we went wherever we wanted on the base. However, they didn't pay very much attention to us because they knew in a few days they were going to ship us out. So it was, you know, but all of us were very conscious, and also most of us were opposed to segregation.
Now, you said that they had the Black Officers Club and the White Officers Club. What were some of the differences that upset the guys at the time?
Well, I never visited the White Officers Club, but I mean, our club was said, you know, music, the normal things that an officer club has, you know, and it's restricted to just officers and their wives and or their girlfriends, and it's usually a convenient. It's a convenience for officers, and that's where you play cards. That's where you have your dances and things of that sort, where you can go and have a drink when you want to and things of that sort. And some of the officers clubs, I mean, like the ones out in the West that I visited after I came from overseas, they had slot machines, they had the swimming pool was near the officers club, and I mean, it was just amazing. and they were, some of them were, were more sophisticated or than others, but on the old basis, those officers' club was the place to go.
Now you mentioned you were overseas. Can you tell us some of your personal experiences? In particular, can you comment on any heroic or memorable combat experience or anything that you might have knew about that you can talk to us about?
I was with the 100th Fighter Squadron, and there were 3 ships, Liberty ships, that the 3 squadrons were assigned to, plus headquarters, and we were on one of the Liberty ships. I've forgotten the name of it now, and we left from Camp Patrick Henry. We landed at Naples, Italy. We left for, we were bivouacked for the first few days at the old University of Naples, which was bombed out. All the buildings were bombed out. There were no windows or anything, but it was sheltered somewhat on the lower floors from the rain or from the wind. And that's where we bivouacked until we were moved to Monte Corvino, which is a little airport near Salerno in Italy. And we left Selfridge Field to go overseas, I think, on December the 20th. And we arrived in Italy just about the latter part of January. And we were flying. The 100th Fighter Squadron was the first fighter squadron of the 332nd Fighter Group to fly. And we were under command of Tresville. He was a West Point graduate also, just like B.O. Davis. However, I think he graduated in 1943. And so we went to Monte Corvino, and we replaced the fighter squad that was being shipped out. And we were given 339, the old 39 airplanes to fly. And we were assigned to Harbor Patrol, Naples Harbor Patrol, and we also covered the convoys that were taking equipment up to Anzio Beachhead. And then we had strafing, were assigned to strafing duties for knocking out bridges and things of that sort.
And you mentioned fighter squadron. Is that just can you tell us a little bit? What is the
fighter squadron? You mean is composed of roughly 35 pilots, mechanics, armament men, electrical for radios, and it's a complete unit in itself. It takes care of the repairs of the airplane, the checking of the repairs and things of that sort. And the 35 pilots usually is about 35 pilots of each squadron. And there were 3 squadrons in the 332nd Fighter Group at this time. And also the 99th Fighter Squadron was fighting in the area. And we were first assigned to the 12th Air Force. And that was support for the Army. So it meant that we did strafing sometime. We covered the convoys that were going up to Anzio and things of that sort. And I think about the 15th of February 1944, the other 2 squadrons, the 301st and 302nd, joined us in Naples. They were assigned, I think some of them were flying from Capodichino Airport, and there was one squadron was assigned to Monte Corvino, where we were flying from.
Were these squadrons integrated, or?
Oh no, these were black squadrons. All squadrons, all the military was separated. The Army was not integrated in 1944.
Okay. What were some of the obstacles you had to face or you had to overcome, either overseas? Did you have anything particular?
Well, once the big obstacle was getting through the cadet corps and getting your wings and of course your bar. And after that is just training. You had to train, you had to know how to control that little airplane you were flying. And you had to take it pretty serious because it would kill you. And so if you took your training serious and you took your engineering missions, that they used to call them, serious, and you tried to master that plane, that was your objective. You mastered it in a way that you could fly at night, you could fly in overcast, you knew how to use your guns, you knew how to maneuver that plane so that nobody could shoot you down, and you tried to be the best pilot possible. And we had little inner fighting with each other. I mean, when we went up, we'd try to get on each other's tail, or if we saw a few of the guys from the 332nd, I mean from the 301st Squadron, and we remember the Hunters Father, we were going to try to show them up in a little way. So it was all good training, and with the idea of making you a better pilot, a superb pilot.
Were things different overseas than they were at home?
Well, I didn't have too much experience at home because I finished August the 30th, I was commissioned in 1943. And by December the 20th, I was on my way overseas. So I had a very short span. I think I had 10 days off for, to visit my family after finishing the Cadet Corps. And the rest of the time, my class was the last class to join the 332nd Fighter Group before they went to Europe. So from September until December the 20th, we were flying day and night. First flight in the morning, and I remember that I flew over 90 some hours in the month of October and November out of Selfish Field, Detroit. That was a lot of flying time in a fighter plane in the weather conditions in that area.
Do you think that you or your commanding officers were aware that your performance might affect the civil rights?
We always was taught to be the best that we could be. Our actions in front of the public, wherever we were, and all fighter pilots were very proud. And so you was almost, it was one of these things that we held our heads high, and we were well respected, and we had a lot of pride. And so we in no way lowered the standard of the Army Air Corps. I think we raised the standard. And our leader, Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., kept the standard higher than I think he had about the highest standard of any officer in the military. And I think it was good. Our standards were never lowered. We learned how to be punctual, to be on time, to respect our fellow officers, and in no way would we do anything to embarrass or bring shame on, the Air Force.
What role did black women play, either as personnel workers or civilian workers?
Well, we were aware of the civilian women played a very important role. They were parachute riggers. They did a lot of the clerical work at the Air Force Base. They rigged out parachutes and things of that sort. And then overseas, of course, we saw a lot of the Red Cross workers. And they were black, of course, and we were really pleased to see beautiful black women, you know, when we came back from the mission, would give us coffee and orange java, you know, juices and things of that sort. And then later on, of course, in the States, we had the WACs. They were women that were a part of the Army. And at certain Air Force bases, we ran in, you know, there were WAC detachments that were assigned to there or to the Army, or the bases there. And so women played a very important part in filling the gap of the men being in combat and filling the voids that were left by the men being in combat.
You just spoke about the impact that the Tuskegee Airmen had on the Civil Rights Movement. What impact did the Tuskegee Airmen have on World War II?
There's one thing that in most instances, when a black squadron or a black group would go any place, or when any group in the Air Force or the Army went place, they would always assign experienced personnel to them. The 99th, the 332nd never had any experienced white personnel assigned to our group, which meant that we had to learn everything from scratch. And I don't know if you saw the movie HBO had about the Tuskegee Airmen. They said, keep up. On the first flight, they gave them very, very few instructions. They said, keep up. You boys keep up. But we were never assigned any experienced personnel. And so we learned everything from scratch. We learned the hard way. And we learned well. And we learned to fly the most complicated planes they had at that time. We flew the P-51s, the P-47s, all of the top fighter ships that was used in World War II.
The Tuskegee was an experiment. Was it supposed to feel that way? You don't understand?
No.
Okay, the Tuskegee experiment was one set up by basically white people to prove that you couldn't do it.
That's right.
Not having experienced people, was that supposed to be another little dig to say?
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't supposed to.
It was set up to fail. And at that time, of course, all of the key people in Washington are the chairman of all the key committees, the military committees.